I was 18 when I first met Grace. At that age, you think you've got life figured out, or at least you think you're supposed to. Senior year of high school, a part-time job, friends I'd known my whole life, and this vague idea that I was going to head off to college and everything would fall neatly into place. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that sometimes the most dangerous situations creep into your life disguised as something exciting, even romantic. Grace and I met at work. It wasn't glamorous, just a part-time gig at a local store. But she stood out immediately. She was a little older, 19, already graduated, and carried herself like she was above everyone else who clocked in. Confident, sharp, funny in this biting, sarcastic way that made you feel like being the punchline of her jokes was a privilege. When she started paying attention to me, I felt like I'd won something. Looking back, the red flags were there from the start. I'd be on shift, bagging groceries or stocking shelves, and I'd look up to see her sitting in the break area, just watching me. At first, I told myself it was sweet, that she liked me enough to hang around. But sometimes I'd catch her staring in this fixed way, like I was under a microscope, like she wasn't admiring me so much as analyzing me. I ignored it. Most people would at that age. When we started dating, she poured herself into the relationship with this intensity that was overwhelming but flattering. She'd text constantly, call every night, want to see me the moment I had a free hour. I thought it meant she really cared. But after the honeymoon weeks wore off, the caring became something else entirely. It started with questions. Where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing? At first, it sounded like normal relationship check-ins. But soon, if I didn't respond within a few minutes, my phone would be lighting up with 25 missed calls, then dozens of texts, each one more desperate or angrier than the last. If I said I was busy, she'd accuse me of lying. If I went to hang out with my friends, she'd guilt me until I felt like I was betraying her just by leaving the house. The walls closed in slowly. I gave up time with my friends because every hangout ended in a fight. I stopped playing video games at night because the sound of a notification tone would make my stomach twist in dread. I stopped doing things I enjoyed altogether. Being with her felt like living in a cage where the bars were invisible but unbreakable. Eventually, I broke up with her. It wasn't dramatic, just exhaustion on my part. Finally saying I couldn't take it anymore. I thought that would be the end. But if you've ever dealt with someone like Grace, you know breakups don't end when the words are said. For her, it was just the beginning. She started waiting outside my job for me to get off shift. I'd walk out into the parking lot and she'd appear from the shadows, rushing to my car, blocking my door, begging me to talk. Sometimes she'd try to reason, other times she'd threaten lawsuits over petty things I didn't even want to get into. It was manipulation in every direction, sweetness, anger, pity, threats, anything to keep me tethered. One night I made the mistake of sitting in her car to talk. She'd cornered me outside work again, and I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe if I heard her out one last time, she'd finally move on. Instead, the conversation spiraled into the same broken record of accusations and guilt trips. Then her dad called. She looked at me, phone in hand, and said, "If you don't sit here and talk to me, I'll have him sue you now." That was the moment I realized I was trapped in something dangerous. Not just toxic, dangerous. I tried to get out of the car, but the doors were locked. When I reached for the handle, she clawed at my arm with her nails, digging so deep I could feel my skin peeling under her grip. I'd never seen her like that before. Her face twisted, eyes full of something I can only describe as malice. She wasn't the girl I'd met at work anymore. She was someone else entirely, and it terrified me. I yanked my arm free by pulling her onto the passenger seat, just enough to slip out the door and sprint to my own car. My heart pounded as I sped away, my headlights carving through the dark streets. I told myself that was it, that I was done with her for good. But I was wrong. Later that night, I was home in my room, trying to distract myself with video games. I'd smoked a little weed, hoping to relax, and I was halfway into a GTA 5 session when I heard the sound of a car outside. At first, I thought it was coming from the game, but then came the tapping on my window. My blinds were thin, barely covering the glass, and my stomach dropped as I froze, controller in hand. Another tap, then a voice. Soft, female, calling my name. Grace. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Weed or not, I knew I wasn't imagining it. I hoped if I stayed quiet, she'd go away. But instead, the tapping turned to banging, and her voice shifted from pleading to rage. You can't do this to me. You're an asshole. I should have called the cops. I know that now. But in the moment, I convinced myself it wasn't worth it, that it was just another outburst, another scene. So I did the dumbest thing possible. I opened the door. She stood there, eyes red, face twisted between anger and tears. She asked for her sweater back in this pitiful, soft tone, like she was rehearsing sympathy. I snapped at her, told her she couldn't show up at 2 a.m. for something so ridiculous. Told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. That's when she broke down completely, screaming, sobbing, shaking. For a moment, guilt flickered in my chest, until I saw it. To her left, half hidden by the thick trunk of the tree in my front yard, was a figure, hooded, motionless, watching. My blood turned to ice. Grace saw my gaze shift and knew immediately that I'd noticed them. She lunged, grabbing my arm again, and in that same instant, the hooded figure bolted out from behind the tree, sprinting straight for my window. I couldn't make out their face, just the blur of motion, but I didn't need to. Adrenaline took over. I slammed the window shut on Grace's arm. She screamed and stumbled back, just as the hooded figure closed in. I locked the window and held up my phone, showing them I was dialing 911. That was enough. They backed off, running to Grace's car. Tires screeched, and within seconds they were gone. I stood frozen in my room, the glow of my TV screen casting shadows across the walls. My chest heaved, breath coming in shallow gasps as I tried to process what had just happened. I'd nearly let them in, nearly been stupid enough to step outside, if I hadn't seen that figure. I don't let myself think about what might have happened. The cops came, wrote a report, promised to call if anything came of it. But of course, without evidence, nothing ever did. Grace went on with her life, as far as I know. Maybe she found someone else to latch onto, someone else to suffocate. But I know the truth. That night, she didn't come alone. And whatever they had planned, robbery, assault, worse, I was 1 second away from becoming their victim. To this day, when I hear a tap on the glass, no matter where I am, my chest tightens, and I think of Grace and the figure in the hood, waiting in the shadows. My name is Amy, and I haven't slept properly since last Tuesday. Not because I physically can't, but because every time I close my eyes, I feel like he's still there, standing in the shadows, waiting for me to drift off so he can step forward again. That's what happens when someone you thought you knew, someone you trusted, reveals themselves to be capable of things you only expect in horror movies. 3 weeks ago, I broke up with my boyfriend, Tommy. We'd been together for almost a year. In the beginning, it felt like something out of a dream. He was charming in that obsessive, can't stop thinking about you way. He texted me good morning and good night without fail. He'd show up with little gifts, like my favorite iced coffee or a random snack he remembered me mentioning once. At first, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Who doesn't want someone who pays that much attention? But attention can rot into control faster than you realize. It started with him asking why I didn't respond quickly enough. If I said I'd been busy, he wanted proof. Then came the odd questions. Did you smile at anyone today? Or, did any guys look at you at the gym? He'd laugh after asking like it was a joke, but I could see the sharpness in his eyes when I answered. A few months in, he started showing up places unannounced. My job, my apartment, even the bars where I went out with girlfriends. I'd glance out the window and see him standing on the sidewalk staring in. My friends hated him for it. They told me to leave, but I kept making excuses. He just loves me too much. He's insecure. He's afraid of losing me. The night he suggested I let him install a tracker on my phone for safety, something inside me snapped. He wasn't asking to share locations, like normal couples sometimes do. He wanted a literal tracking app, something he could use to monitor me at all times. I said no. He pushed. I said no again. That was when I knew it was over. The breakup itself was quiet. He cried at first, then went silent. I remember hanging up after our final phone call with a tightness in my chest, like I'd just closed a door, but left the window wide open. For about a week, things were calm. I blocked his number, started going back to the gym, tried cooking real meals instead of just living off takeout. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Then, the texts started. They didn't come from his number. They came from random, unlisted numbers, each one sending a short, cryptic message. Why are you ignoring me? Don't pretend you don't think about me. You look pretty when you walk fast. Each time I blocked the number. I told myself it was spam, some bot trying to get a rise out of me. But deep down, I knew. The noises came next. The first time I was half asleep padding down the hall to the bathroom when I heard something soft from downstairs. A shuffle, a faint creak. I froze mid-step, heart pounding, but I wasn't the type to investigate noises in the dark. I locked myself in the bathroom, told myself it was the pipes or the radiator, then crawled back into bed. Another night, I woke to the sound of a door opening. It was faint, maybe even part of a dream, but the silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. I sat in bed, clutching the sheets, staring at my closed bedroom door for what felt like hours. When I came home from visiting my sister that weekend, I knew something was wrong. Nothing was missing, nothing broken, but the energy in the apartment was off. The air felt disturbed, unsettled, and then I saw it. The hallway closet door slightly ajar. That door is always closed, always, and when it's open it swings out fully because of the way the hinges sit. But this time it was barely cracked, just enough for someone to peek out. I stood frozen, staring at the sliver of darkness between the door and the frame, convinced that if I blinked, I'd see an eye looking back at me. Finally, I forced myself forward and yanked the door wide open. Nothing. Just coats, shoes, and the smell of cedar from the mothballs I kept inside. That night, I wedged a chair under my bedroom door handle and slept with a knife under my pillow. The lamp stayed on. I told myself I was being paranoid, but when I woke up at 3 a.m., the lamp was off. The door was wide open, and at the foot of my bed, barely visible in the darkness, was the silhouette of a head. I blinked, trying to convince myself I was still dreaming. Then I felt it. Hands brushing across my feet, slow and deliberate. I screamed. The figure moved, climbing onto the bed, and I recognized the voice immediately. Calm down, it's me. It's just me. Tommy. My scream cut off into a gasp, and before I could start again, his hand clamped over my mouth. His weight pressed me into the mattress. He whispered, frantic but insistent, "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk. Stop screaming, please." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. My knife was still under the pillow, inches from my hand, but I was too terrified to move. If I went for it, I'd have to be ready to use it, and I didn't know if I could. He took his hand away slowly, his eyes locked on mine. "I just want us back," he said. "I never wanted it to end like this." I asked him how he got in, my voice barely above a whisper. His answer made my blood run cold. He'd made a copy of my apartment key, months ago, back when we were still together. He'd stolen my keys one night while I slept and had a duplicate made. "Just in case of an emergency," he said, like it was reasonable, like it wasn't a complete violation of my trust and my safety. He stayed there for nearly half an hour, talking, pleading, sometimes crying, sometimes cold and angry. I barely remember what I said, just that I agreed with him enough to keep him calm. I even told him maybe we could talk tomorrow, just to get him to leave. Finally, he did. He slipped out the door like he'd never been there at all. The second the door clicked shut, I grabbed my phone and called the police. They came, checked the apartment, took my statement. I filed a report, and later a restraining order. A detective traced the strange numbers back to Tommy's phone through a fake texting app, which helped my case. But all of that came after the fact. The part I can't escape is the memory of waking up in the dark, seeing his silhouette at the foot of my bed, and feeling his hands on me while I was too frozen with fear to fight back. That moment replays every time I close my eyes. I moved out of that apartment. I stayed with my parents until I could find a new place, somewhere with better locks, better blinds, better everything. But none of that erases what happened. If you're reading this, if you with someone who shows even the earliest signs of this kind of obsession, don't brush it off. Don't make excuses like I did. Leave. Leave before you wake up in the dark and realize the person who is supposed to love you is standing over your bed, deciding what you're worth. Because once you see them for what they are, it's already too late. I met Marissa at a mutual friend's party. From the very first moment, she drew people in. Magnetic, intense, and completely unapologetic. You couldn't ignore her, and honestly, you didn't want to. The way she spoke, the way she laughed, the way she made you feel like she saw straight into your soul. It was intoxicating. We started dating not long after. At first, it was everything I wanted. She was vibrant, passionate, and utterly devoted. She left little notes on my mirror, sent me messages before I even woke up, and somehow always knew when I needed a pick-me-up without me saying a word. I felt like I had stepped into the world I'd always imagined, where love was thrilling, constant, and utterly consuming. But intensity, I would learn, has a dark side. The first signs were small. A few too many texts when I didn't reply immediately. A worried tone that shifted to anger within minutes. She didn't do calm. She didn't do patience. Everything was either perfect or catastrophic. If I liked an Instagram post from someone she didn't approve of, she accused me of cheating. If I asked her to slow down or respect a boundary, she shut down completely. And when I say shut down, I don't mean she got quiet for a moment. I mean she would sit in my apartment for hours, staring at the wall, refusing to leave until I proved everything was fine again. She began showing up unannounced at my office. At first, it was romantic, like a surprise coffee run. I laughed, charmed by her audacity. But when it became a pattern, I realized it wasn't cute. It was invasive. She was testing boundaries, learning where I was at all times, and I was too naive, too enamored to fully see it. 6 months in, her need for control escalated. Every minor delay in responding to her texts would trigger a cascade of messages. Worried, then angry, then apologetic, then threatening in subtle ways. I made excuses for her. Trauma, childhood issues, abandonment. I thought if I was patient, if I proved I wasn't going to leave, she'd calm down. But the more I gave, the more she needed. Eventually, I reached my limit. I told her it had to end. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She just stared at me with a cold, calculating calm that made my skin crawl. "You think it's over for you?" she said quietly. "But it's not over for me." That night, I blocked her on everything, changed my phone number, and even asked my building manager for a different unit. I thought I'd escaped. For a few weeks, it seemed to work. Then the letters started. At first, they were almost nostalgic, sentimental. "I miss waking up to you," one said, written on a small piece of paper with delicate handwriting. I held it, trying to convince myself it was harmless, almost sweet. The next letter made me uneasy. "You always check the door 3 times before you go to bed. You probably don't even notice it, but I do." My stomach twisted. How did she know this? I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, let alone told anyone about my habits. Then came the one that terrified me. "You wore your blue hoodie Monday, the one with the hole in the sleeve. You should sew that up before it gets worse." That hoodie, I had worn it to run errands, to pick up groceries in the pouring rain. I hadn't seen anyone I recognized. No one had been near me. Yet somehow, she had. I realized then that moving across town wouldn't be enough. I fled, cutting all ties. A new city, a new job, no forwarding address. I created a new email, a P.O. box under a false name, and even got a German Shepherd rescue to keep me company and make me feel safer. I thought it would be enough. For months it was. Then one evening, months later, I found a post-it note on my front door. Yellow, written in red ink. "I don't like the beard." I had grown it out for a few months. Nobody had seen me with it except my dog and my work webcam, which I kept covered unless I was on a call. My stomach sank. This wasn't a coincidence. The next morning, tucked under my car's windshield wiper, another note. Better. I filed another police report, but without direct threats or proof, there wasn't much they could do. The fear, however, was real. Every detail, every routine, became a potential trap. Locks were checked twice, blinds drawn at all times. I slept lightly, staring at ceilings, listening for creaks, wondering if the footsteps I heard outside were her. And then, one night, the envelope arrived. Inside was a photo from years ago, a Polaroid of Marissa and me at a boardwalk photo booth. Our heads close together, smiling, except her eyes had been grotesquely stretched, like someone had used a needle to distort them. I packed immediately. Not just across town this time, but into the mountains, 3 hours from the nearest city. Cash for rent, month-to-month lease, fake name, burner phone. I worked remotely, barely leaving my cabin, only interacting with the occasional delivery driver. I thought I was safe, until the snow came. Footsteps, crunching softly but deliberately outside my cabin. My dog went ballistic. I found prints the next morning. Shoe marks circling my property, moving from window to window. No notes, no letters, but I knew. I spent the day packing again, driving back to my hometown, moving in with roommates who were ex-military. Pickup trucks, giant flags, the kind of house where anyone with bad intentions thinks twice. Marissa wasn't just a stalker. She was mentally unwell, obsessive, and dangerous. And despite all precautions, the memory of her letters, her photos, the way she seemed to know me even after I vanished, it still haunts me. Now, I live with constant vigilance, hyper-aware of every shadow, every creak, every flicker of movement. But I survived, and I keep moving. Because if I stop, if I let my guard down even for a second, I know she'll find me again.